So, hi everybody. This is Jody Johnston-Powell, and I am president of Parents Toolshop Consulting and a licensed social worker, certified family life educator, second-generation parent educator, author of the Parents Toolshop and about a half a dozen other Toolshop curricula. And today's presentation is going to be on the history of parenting styles, what's missing, and what might research discover next. And the reason I'm doing this particular presentation is because Parents Toolshop is one of the few parenting curricula that teaches 5 parenting styles, and I sometimes get the question why that is. So in the original, the original parenting styles, there were 3 parenting styles. And those were from one of the very first parent education curricula, which was PET, Parent Effectiveness Training, that was back in the 60s, STEP, which was Systematic Training for Effective Parenting in the 70s, and Active Parenting in the 80s. And that was during the time that I was developing Parents Toolshop. And as I mentioned, I'm second-generation parent educator. So my parents were originally trained in PET, then in STEP. STEP was the first program that I taught. And back then, the teachings about parenting styles was that there were 3 parenting styles: Autocratic, Permissive, and Democratic. Autocratic was, the overall style was that there were a lot of limits with too few choices. Parents had rights and deserved respect, but not children. And it was kind of more of a dictator kind of a parenting style where parents would dictate the rules, give commands, and would tend to punish in ways that children might perceive as harsh or unfair. And the long-term effects of that were identified as rebellion, resentment, revenge, or, on the other hand, kind of the other extreme, is blind obedience that could put children at risk. The other parenting style was the opposite of that, which was permissive, where the parent didn't set enough limits, have rules, or much structure, and let children just kind of do whatever they wanted to do, to be their friend, that kind of thing. And the long-term consequences of that were identified that the child would end up developing this sense of entitlement. They may become, quote, spoiled, have difficulty operating in structured settings, or resist or lack respect for authority. And then the third parenting style was called democratic. And the definition of that was that the parent, it was in between those 2 other parenting styles, and that the parent would set limits and have rules and structure, but also offer children choices and freedom within those limits. Had more open, effective, two-way communication, and used much more respectful discipline. And that the long-term consequences were that for what most parents have as their goals for parenting, that democratic parenting would lead to those outcomes best. The problem was that the term democratic was very confusing. As I first started teaching parenting styles, this term democratic, is like people go, well, in the U.S. we have 2 major political parties. One's called the Democrats and one's called the Republicans. And so Republicans would say, well, what, I have to be a Democrat in order to be an effective parent? Or, well, is this a democracy? Do children vote on every decision? And if I have 3 children, 2 parents are always going to be outvoted? Or is this a democracy where we're all equal and parents don't have any authority? And so I and other people who were teaching these 3 styles were constantly having to provide clarifications. Well, in about the 80s, then their research found that there were 4 parenting styles, and one was added to that. These were now called Authoritarian, which replaced the name of Autocratic. Permissive was still there. Authoritative replaced the name of Democratic, and there was a new parenting style identified, which was a subcategory of Permissive, which was different. So the authoritative style was now a new name for Democratic. The Authoritarian was the new name for Autocratic. Permissive was the same, but this new style that was added, the 4th one, was a subcategory of permissive parenting, and it was identified as being different from the more overindulgent kind of permissive parent, as being uninvolved. And this 4th style was primarily identified by McCoby and Martin in '83. It was a different type of permissive parent, and it was more neglectful, distant, uninvolved, where the other type of permissive parent was overly involved, doing too much for the child. And so they really did little for the child, especially if, it was like parenting is inconvenient, made few demands, had very low responsiveness and little communication. And as a result, the child would just kind of run wild and free and have difficulty with structure, demands, and they may survive kind of through street smarts, but they didn't really thrive. So now there were 4 parenting styles, which was more accurate, showing the difference between the 2 types of permissive parents. But the problem was that the language of authoritarian and authoritative was just confusingly similar. And not all authoritarian parents control through power. Some use manipulation, some use bribes, micromanagement, and these 4 styles really didn't account for that. But Adler, on whose theory most research-based parenting programs and those who have been proven effective long-term, most of those teach Adler's teachings, Alfred Adler, and he was a psychologist, and he had identified personality priorities. So as I was learning and getting trained as a parent educator back in the 80s, not only did I learn the PET, the STEP, active parenting, as I was developing mine, but there was a program called The Next Step, and it shared information about Adler's personality priorities. And so this was a theory, Adler's theories, which had been very thoroughly researched to be proven effective. These personality priorities, pretty much Adlerian theorists all recognized 4, and in the next step they identified a possible 5th. And these personality priorities, none is better or worse than any other priority. They each have their strengths, but when kind of gone to the extreme, these strengths can become liabilities. And so those are control, where the priority is to control self and others or the situation. The assets of that, or the strengths of that, is that they tend to be very strong leaders. They're organized, productive, persistent, assertive. They follow rules and set rules. However, they can often feel challenged, tense or resistant or frustrated when other people are wanting to have some control. And so they may tend to get into power struggles more often. The price of kind of going overboard with that is that the effective leadership kind of becomes then more of a dictatorship. There's not a whole lot of spontaneity. People are viewed as objects to control, and what they really try to avoid is kind of humiliation, the unexpected. They fear ridicule. And so this attempt to control self and others can then be used either for its strengths, but can also, in its extreme, be used in a way that becomes a liability. The second one is superiority, where people perceive themselves as being better or trying to be better than other people, kind of outdoing people, improving themselves, trying to be the most competent, capable, useful. And so the strength here is that they're very knowledgeable, they seek perfection, they have very high standards for achievement. However, that perfectionism can often be a result of feeling inadequate, inferior. They feel guilty, and a lot of times they would make others feel guilty or inferior. When this personality strength was kind of carried to the extreme, it would become a liability. And so other people themselves, those with the superiority personality, might feel overburdened, overly responsible, overly involved. But the effects on others is that others would often feel inferior, and this superiority would then kind of trigger other people's insecurities also. The fourth one is comfort, and this is someone who doesn't like a lot of conflict. Comfort's kind of defined differently for each person, but they tend to be very easygoing. They make very few demands. They kind of mind their own business, don't like conflict, so they either withdraw and avoid conflict, or they try to be the peacemaker if they have the skills to do that. And they're just in general kind of very mellow and easygoing. What they become annoyed by is anything that's inconvenient. They don't like boredom. They don't like things that annoy them, irritate them, and they will tend to withdraw to maintain their comfort level. As a result, they often have a reduced productivity. They may not use their talents or live up to their full potential. And what they tend to avoid is stress, responsibility, and expectations. The fourth personality priority, and remember the four are ones that pretty much all Adlerians recognize, is the pleasing personality priority, which is to please others. So they tend to be very friendly and considerate, non-aggressive. They tend to compromise very easily. They like to volunteer, do what others expect, and do whatever they can to kind of please others and make sure everybody's happy and comfortable. They may be pleased at first, but later on they can become very frustrated at their attempts to help and that it's never good enough. The price that they pay is that they spend so much time trying to please others that they don't spend much time tending to their own needs. They tend to put their needs above others. They become discouraged and disillusioned when they have helped everybody so much and they just don't appreciate it. And so it can kind of lead into that martyr role or doing too much to the point of not doing enough for themselves. The fifth one was identified in the next step by those authors, Donald Dinkmeyer and Gary McKay. And what they said is, to the extent that we accept ourselves and realize that we don't actually have to do anything special to belong, we will also have this fifth priority. And this fifth priority they call social interest, where the person wants to further society's interests. They tend to work more cooperatively with others versus competing with others. They care about people and show compassion. And it tends to have the strengths of the other four priorities, which are used in a positive way, kind of choosing which of those strengths is most appropriate for a particular situation. Well, when I learned those 5 personality priorities, I saw how they actually matched up very well with the 4 parenting styles. And so I blended them and kind of matched them up with the styles that had been identified. However, there's one style, because remember there were only 4 parenting styles identified through research so far, but Adler identified 4 to 5 personality priorities. So when I overlaid these 4 parenting styles with Adler's 5 personality priorities, it created the 5 parenting styles that are taught in the Parents Toolshop. And so my big question is whether or not anyone will ever research this perspective of what relation do Adler's 4 or 5 personality priorities, how do those relate to parenting styles, and is this matchup really accurate? These personality priorities actually are not just for parenting. They are for any relationship. It's just how we operate in life. And so actually in the first course, which is through Relationship Toolshop and how you apply the Universal Blueprint to adult relationships, these really become much more important in terms of taking a look at our relationship style as opposed to just a parenting style. If we're a boss, with employees or something like that where we are in a position of authority or leadership, then some of the parenting styles kind of become a little bit more congruous. But if you're looking at, say, a marriage or friendship or an adult-to-adult relationship, then something like the parenting styles and discipline and that terminology really doesn't fit too well. But when you look at Adler's personality priorities, it really fits very well. And so that's been a real benefit in being able to apply Parents Toolshop concepts to any relationship, which people have found the Universal Blueprint is effective in any relationship, not just with parenting. So when I was developing Parents Toolshop, 2 of my mentors and people I really admired, one was Barbara Coloroso, who was the author of Kids Are Worth It, and Jane Nelson, who's the author of Positive Discipline. So what I liked about what they did is that they gave very easy to remember names that were kind of descriptive and would help remember what the different parenting styles were. And then I'll comment more on Jane Nelson a little bit later in terms of how she presented them, because I really took on, with her permission, presenting the styles in that way. So in Parents Toolshop, what we have are 5 parenting styles. The first is called the Power Patrol. And so research has confirmed this. The original name for this is the Autocratic, which then was changed to Authoritarian. And Adler's personality priority that it matches with is control. And so we call that the Power Patrol. And you'll see in the parenting style show that we're going to show a little bit later, that there's a visual way that parents can remember this style. The other type of over-controlling parent is the perfectionistic supervisor. And this is the style that no one has actually really confirmed, which doesn't mean it's not accurate. It just means that no one's done research to see if there's really a correlation between Adler's personality priority of superiority and this other kind of controlling parent. So the perfectionistic supervisor also is concerned with control, but rather than using harsh power techniques, what they tend to use is perfectionism, guilt trips, bribes, manipulation, that kind of thing. It's not perceived as being quite so negative or harsh or unfair, but yet the goal behind this parenting style is still to control. It's just using different means to do that based upon the parent's personality tends to be more that superior. The other, on the other extreme, the most extreme permissive, is what Parents Toolshop calls the avoider. And so this is that fourth parenting style that was identified later as uninvolved. It matches very closely with Adler's personality priority of comfort, and so Parents Toolshop calls that the avoider. The less extreme permissive parent is the overindulger, which is a little bit more descriptive than just permissive. Both the overindulger and the avoider are permissive, but in different ways. So where the avoider is uninvolved, the overindulger is more indulgent. Their personality priority would fit with Adler's pleasing personality priority of trying to do too much for the child, kind of waiting on them hand and foot with a silver platter, and trying to be their friend rather than their parent. And then the fifth parenting style that Parents Toolshop uses, I call balanced. And so this is very consistent with what was originally called democratic, was later on called authoritative, and also matches Adler's personality priority of social interest. I call it balanced because it's kind of in the middle, and we use a scale from the different extremes. And balanced is a lot like social interest in that they may be strong leaders, they may be very much focused on doing their very best and being organized, but not micromanaging. They may be very laid back and mellow, but not to the point that they're uninvolved. They may be very compassionate and empathetic and maybe be friendly with children, or children might feel that they can talk to their parents about whatever, but they're not overly indulgent and do everything for children. They empower their children. They have open communication. They do discipline, but in a very respectful way that helps children develop self-discipline. And so it's that blend of what democratic and authoritative have always been, just with a different name. So when we look at the 5 parenting styles that Parents Toolshop teaches, the fact that it incorporates Adler's theory and current research really gives it a benefit of being able to know that it is research-based, but not just on parenting styles, but also the theory that almost all proven effective parenting programs are based on, which is Adler's theory. It also uses names that are very descriptive and easy to visualize and remember. And they're presented in a more strength goal-focused way, so that when parents set their goals of what outcomes they want, and then they look at the 5 parenting styles, they're able to see for themselves whether or not the outcomes of the 5 different parenting styles are the outcomes that they're wanting. If they're not the outcomes that they want, then they're able to see themselves which style would be most likely to help them reach those goals, which almost across the board is the balanced parenting style. And the way that I present that is with a parenting style show, and this is on Parents Toolshop YouTube channel.
Gentlemen, today we have a parenting style show. These are 5 different parenting styles that you may see in your next door neighbor, in your own home. You may have seen 100 years ago, you may see today. First, we have over here our Power Patrol. Tell us who you are.
I'm the Power Patrol parent, the supreme ruler of my domain. I expect my subjects to do things my way or the highway. I don't listen to their feelings or ideas. They do what I want because I said so. Fear is good. It keeps the peons under my control. If they don't do what I say, I'll make sure they really pay.
So what do you think about that power control parenting? What would it be like to have a parent like that? Put yourself in a child's shoes.
Scary.
Pardon?
Scary, maybe?
Scary. Okay. What else?
No fun.
No fun. Okay. What do you think the long-term outcomes are? Depression? One person had said therapy. What other?
Acting out.
Acting out. A lot of times you get rebellion, or you may get blind obedience. What's the problem with blind obedience? Which means I will do anything you tell me to. What's the problem with blind obedience?
They know how to make their own decisions.
They don't know how to make their own decisions. And if somebody tells them to do something that really isn't right, do they have the discretion to know the difference?
Time's up.
Oh, well, who are you?
My turn.
Okay, who are you?
Okay, I'm the perfectionist supervisor parent. I'm very organized and know the right way to do everything. I get my way with bribes, payoffs, incentives, and lectures. I have a good reputation, and my kids better not spoil that. I'll make sure they never stray. If they do, I'll give a guilt trip right away.
So still on the controlling side, but instead of using power to control, what does the perfectionist use?
Bribes.
Yep.
Okay, bribes, incentives, the perfectionism. You make me unhappy. You have to make me look good. Get good grades so everybody knows I'm a good parent. Oh, bribes work. We're going to talk about that in the cooperation section. They work what? In the short run. But we're going to talk about what research says in the long run. All right, well, let's look at the other extreme over here. Who is this on the end?
The avoider. I'm the avoider parent. I hate inconvenience and kids' so troubles. I hear and see what I want so I can avoid conflict. Hey, my kid didn't do it, and it's your problem to solve. I don't want my kids to expect much from me. In return, I let them run wild and free.
So the complete opposite is kind of abdication of our parenting role. And what's the long-term outcome of that? If we never set any limits for children. Okay, criminal? Okay, could be. All right, and over this avoider parent, it's the whole thing of convenience. You know, is that I want to stay comfortable. I don't want feathers ruffled. You know, I'm just going to pretend that this isn't going on, and maybe it'll go away. Okay, so what's a little bit less extreme than that is who?
I'm the overindulgent parent. I love my kids and I'll do anything for them. I'll deliver homework, solve their problems, and fix any meal they want on a silver platter. I understand their feelings so well, I can keep them happy all the time. I give them respect, I'm sure of that. So why do they treat me like a doormat?
Have you ever heard parents say, I give and give and give to my kids? Why do they treat me like dirt? I've given them so much. And they just don't appreciate it. They're so ungrateful. Red flag. There's a silver platter somewhere. What's the long-term consequence of doing too much for kids? Lazy, because then they never learn what? To do it themselves. Okay. The thing about the overindulger, though, is that, again, their intentions are very good for all of these. Over here, our power patrol usually is a very strong leader. And that's a wonderful quality. But they get imbalanced because they try to control too much. Perfectionistic supervisor. I do a lot of trainings for teachers and early childhood educators who have groups of 30 kids in a room. Do they have to be organized? You bet. But when they go home, they try to have their children live off of their checklist, and everything has to be perfect. That's how they get imbalanced. Our avoider here, my husband tends to lean I tend to lean when I'm imbalanced towards the perfectionistic supervisor. My husband tends to be the avoider because he's very laid back. Real easy to get along with. As you can tell, I'm rather high energy, so that's kind of been a nice balance for us. But he gets imbalanced that if there's conflict, it's like, no, stop, quit arguing. We're not arguing, we're working it out. We just happen to have loud voices. Our overindulger here Usually they're very very empathetic. They really feel for their children. They're very loving, but they just want to do so much for their kids that it ends up being a disservice to their children. So every one of these has very positive qualities, but it can tend to get imbalanced. And when it gets imbalanced, that's where the unhealthy long-term consequences happen. But we haven't heard from our person in the middle here. Who is this?
I'm the balanced parent. I want to raise responsible, self-disciplined adults, so I teach my kids the skills they need to succeed in life. They learn self-control, decision-making, and the value behind my rules. They are part of the family team. I give respect. I set respectful, reasonable boundaries and let my children make choices within my bottom line limits. I help my children learn from their mistakes by holding them accountable for the outcomes of their behavior choices. All this prevents a lot of problems, but when they arise, we find a win-win solution. My kids can share their feelings and have a say, but might not always get their own way.
All right, before you all sit down, I want each of you to read the last sentence of your card. Okay? Read yours.
If they don't do what I say, I'll make sure they really pay.
Perfectionistic?
I'll make sure they never stray. If they do, I'll give a guilt trip right away.
Okay. Avoider?
I don't want my kids to expect much from me. In return, I let them run wild and free.
Okay. Overindulger?
I give them respect. I'm sure of that. So why do they treat me like a doormat?
Okay, and the last line of yours?
My kids can share their feelings and have a say, but might not always get their own way.
Okay, keep those in mind throughout the rest of our discussion. Give everybody a round of applause for our model.
If you want to find out what your parenting style is, if you go to Parents Toolshop, and actually I will demonstrate right here, the Parenting Styles quiz is at parentstoolshop.org, resources, and then Parenting Styles quiz. And so you can just take that there, and there's some scoring on it. And then there's a little bonus, if you want, down here. If you want to know what the scores mean, then you can just sign up for a free, there's like a little 14-page excerpt from Chapter 2 of the Parents Toolshop book that describes that even more and offers a few suggestions. You know, if you're a Power Patrol, what you can do to get in balance, in the balance zone, and that's for each one of them, of what you can do.